Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Ravi Allada, the Executive Director of Michigan Neuroscience Institute and Director of the Allada Lab. Dr. Allada's research has significantly advanced our understanding of the molecular mechanisms of circadian clocks, sleep homeostasis, and their connections to brain health and disease. His work uses Drosophila and mammalian models to uncover how internal clocks influence behavior, metabolism, and even lifespan, and he has a leading voice in connecting circadian biology with real-world applications that can improve human health. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me come out.
So my first question is, what first drew you to studying the molecular mechanisms behind circadian rhythms?
Yeah, it's a great question. Kind of the origin story, if you will.
Yes.
I was in medical school. It's a little bit of a circuitous story. I was in medical school at the University of Michigan, where I am now, and I went off to do research at the National Institutes of Health, and I was thinking of working either in cancer or in AIDS, this was the early 1990s. And happened to run into someone who said, "Oh, you got to go talk to this guy. He's the smartest guy at the NIH. His name was Howard Nash." And I took that advice. And when I went and talked to him, he was working on general anesthesia. And he was actually studying how these inhaled gases that put you to sleep, he was trying to figure out how they work. Um, and to be honest, we still don't fully understand how they work. But he was also using the fruit fly, Drosophila, as a model system. And so later, when I finished up my research there at the NIH, returned to medical school, did a very short residency at Brigham and Women's Hospital. Then, when I was choosing a postdoctoral fellowship for training, I thought about what I really liked, and I really liked the fly model. And when I looked at people studying, and I also was interested in behavior in general. And so I ended up finding a lab, Michael Rosbach's lab at Brandeis, that studied circadian rhythms in the fruit fly. Circadian rhythms obviously control sleep-wake states. There's some connection with anesthesia, also kind of puts us in a kind of sleep, although it's a little bit different. So it sort of was a little bit connected to where I kind of got started in my research career.
So my next question is about Drosophila and using it as a model organism. Do you think there are any unique insights that come from using it as a model to study circadian rhythms?
Oh, tremendous. Fly is really a great model system to do genetics. Um, uh, Obviously we use it, many high school students use it in their biology labs. College students use it in their lab courses. So it's easy to use, and that's one of the reasons we use it. You can grow up large numbers of flies relatively easily, relatively inexpensively. And it's easy to manipulate genes in that
Right.
in
Yeah.
that fly. And so if your goal is to determine which genes are playing a role in a complex process, then the fly is a great system to use. So it was really back in the 1960s that Ron Konopka and Seymour Benzer at Caltech uh, put this idea into action where they did large scale random chemical mutagenesis in the fruit fly and looked for flies that had interesting or unusual behaviors. And one of the behaviors they looked at was the circadian rhythm, the 24-hour rhythm in the flies, actually in the eclosion of the adult fly from its pupal case, which is very circadian. And they found three mutants, one that had, instead of doing that every 24 hours, they had one mutant that did every 19 hours. They've called the gene period, and they called that the
Oh,
short allele
okay, that's where they
period.
came from. Okay.
And then
That's
they had
crazy.
another mutant fly that was 29 hours, and they called that per long. And they had another fly that had no rhythm evident whatsoever, just to close at all times of day. They called that just per zero. Um, and turned out that this was a major breakthrough. It was really ultimately then the cloning of the gene, that is, what was the molecular nature of the period gene, that led to the idea that the transcriptional feedback loop, that is where the per gene is transcribed
Yeah.
and then it's translated into per protein, and per protein ultimately feeds back negatively to control that. And that is basically the gears of a 24-hour clock that governs the fruit flies sleep and wake behavior. And you may ask yourself, do I really care about the fruit flies sleep wake cycle? Maybe, probably not. But it turns out that we humans also have a period gene. It's highly conserved with the fly period gene. And the period gene in humans also regulates our 24-hour sleep-wake cycle. And so this was really showed the tremendous power of starting from the 1960s and doing these kind of mutagenesis in this fly
Yeah.
all the way to ultimately discovering, why it is we wake up and go to bed, every day.
Yeah.
Of course, as you may know, this discovery of the core mechanism of this period gene led to the awarding of the 2017 Nobel Prize.
Yeah. Yeah.
My postdoc advisor, actually, and a couple of other of his collaborators.
Wow, that's super cool. Yeah. So my mentor, Dr. Eric Herzog, I mean, he explained this to me when I began working in his
Yeah,
lab.
yeah.
And it's super cool to hear from you how the fruit flies, like the raw story from how the model organisms were used and help us with our research today. So speaking of exciting discoveries, in your view, what have been some of the most exciting molecular or genetic discoveries in circadian science in the past 5 to 10 years? So a little more recently.
Oof, that's a hard one.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to like think for a little bit what the
yeah,
most exciting in the
yeah.
last 5 or 10 years. I just came from a meeting, although I think I'm not
Oh,
allowed to speak about some of the things at the meeting. Well, I'll just talk about some exciting stuff.
yeah.
Um, uh, to me, boy, you got me going here. One was there was a recent paper um, describing a new mechanism of the clock um, involving these special ATPases that do a lot of like protein conformational changes. And they discovered that I think it was discovered in the fruit fly, but then they showed that it was evident in mice but also in lots of other organisms. So one of the things we know about this is that the evolution of the clock probably happened multiple times. So I told you the fly and human clocks look kind of similar. So these are animals, so they all
Yeah,
look similar. Plants have their own clock, fungi have their own clock, bacteria have their own clock. And there are some similar principles, but the genes don't look, so similar between
yeah,
them, suggesting that it probably evolved independently. Um, so I think that's really I think they found that this gene seems to be working in the clock in many different organisms. It would
yeah. So
suggest that it's like a very ancient, like maybe the original,
yeah,
the
I mean,
OG clock.
actually, one of the questions I was going to ask is like, since we're just talking about model organisms, I was curious if there were any like really interesting model organisms that that would be useful for circadian research. And I'm looking for like some animal I've never heard of, maybe. So I'm just curious if
Oh,
you have any ideas.
well,
Yeah.
y- one of the ones that I think is really interesting for sleep, and I think they do show 24-hour rhythms, their sleep-wake cycles, jellyfish is like one.
Okay. Cool. Yeah.
Um, another organism that people have been looking at are like sponges.
Wow.
I don't know that
So
it's
you-
setting
you're-
up for circadian rhythms, though. I should probably pull that back. Excuse me. Trying to think of what's a good circadian model. Oh, I know mosquitoes is one that people have
Wow.
been looking at, and
Interesting.
obviously because mosquitoes are very important from a disease standpoint. So I think having
That's cool.
a new model system like that is very useful.
Yeah. So now we're gonna shift a little bit into like policy. So for advocates like pushing to delay high school start times, how do you think like, and I think I've covered this question a lot, but I just want to hear it from you. How do you think molecular research supports the argument for later school start times?
Well, I don't know that you necessarily need the molecular research for
Right.
that,
Yeah,
but
that's
there
true.
is plenty of research
In
that
the
shows
background.
a couple things. One is that adolescents, say roughly between the ages, I don't know, 15 and 22, um, have a biologically driven delayed
Right.
clock phase.
2 hours.
So that means they have trouble going to bed at night, trouble waking up in the morning.
Yeah.
And the result of that is if you start school times at a very specific time of day, or early time,
Yeah.
then people will have to wake up earlier than their biologically driven clock says.
Yeah.
They will generally lose sleep as a result,
Yeah.
not get as much sleep as they would want, and then they will suffer the consequences of that. So I think the research is pretty strong there. I believe there was a study, I want to say from a colleague at University of Washington, Horacio de
Oh,
Iglesia.
I interviewed him. Yeah.
Yeah, and so where they actually implement
Seattle.
change in school start time
Yeah,
in
yeah.
school
I was
system,
talking with them about like how we could do that maybe in St.
yeah,
Louis or other
and
districts.
demonstrated that
Yeah.
the benefits of that. So I think that it's
Yeah.
because right now, because it was kind of theoretical, right?
Right. Yeah, I understand.
We talk about it, there was a
That's true.
delay and this is bad, but
Yeah.
until someone goes in and actually makes the change and like observes the benefits,
Yeah.
necessarily know you don't necessarily know like who whether it should work or not.
Yeah.
And I've spoken to teachers, and there's some things school systems have been making some adjustments.
Yeah.
One of the things that one of the intermediate steps you can take, and one that was taken by, when my kids were in high school, um, they used to do, we know that what happens is a phenomenon known as social jet lag,
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard.
um, where you wake up at 8 a.m. during the weekdays because you have to go to school or whenever you get up, and on the weekends you sleep in. So it's almost like you're traveling to the West Coast,
Yeah.
you know, and then on Monday morning you have to get back onto the old schedule and go back east and wake up early again. So that's probably the hardest day is Monday morning. We all
Yeah.
kind of know that.
A lot of people would agree
Um,
with you on that.
and so what they did in my kids' school system is they didn't have the first period on Mondays.
Oh, okay. That's smart.
So they just let you, so
Interesting.
they just didn't they skipped that class
Okay.
or something like that. It was some,
Yeah, yeah.
maybe they even skipped that morning.
Like a
So
late
it wasn't
start.
like they changed the school start time
Right.
for the entire year. And I think they didn't even do it every Monday. They did it like some Mondays.
Okay.
So not enough to like change the curricular content.
Right,
Like
right.
they'd have to, or even change the time of all the sports team practices, all the band practice. You move that school start time, then like sports gets affected. This is what I'm told was
Yeah, sports is one of the biggest
because
concerns.
the other school systems have to change too. So everybody has to change all at the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah.
And
Maybe
that's
like
the
games
that's the
and
challenge of
that's
coordinating everyone
really
to
hard.
do
That's
that.
a very interesting. I've actually never heard of like just moving it back on Monday, but I can see where that allows for a trade-off and still like a
Yeah.
good amount of benefit,
So I don't
especially
know if anyone has looked at the positive or negative benefits of doing that, but that's
yeah.
they did do that.
I've never heard about it used in school until now, or I mean, I haven't even heard of like the method, but most of the schools that I've like, or most of the people I've talked to have either like shifted it fully or not. But this
Yeah.
is very interesting. I think this could be a more feasible option
Yeah, it might
for
be
a
an
lot of schools.
easier
Yeah.
to implement.
So this is more of a fun, creative question. This one might take some time to answer, but if you could change one thing about University of Michigan's campus, like anywhere, to improve people's alignment with circadian campus, what would you change? And this could be anything from lighting,
Well,
counter.
from a circadian rhythm standpoint,
Okay, yeah.
I think uh, I would use essentially a version of school start time.
Okay,
Like I would change the class schedule
yeah,
to push more classes later in the day and perhaps even in the evening. I noticed that during COVID, when you had just like purely online Zoom,
yeah,
um, I think students were requesting, hey, can we do this, at 7 at night, right?
yeah.
So many of the Zoom sessions were actually held in the evening. We don't normally have classes in the evening. And remember, so I think that would be a huge benefit. I actually want to do a study. I don't know if you're familiar with my baseball study, but
No, actually, no.
I wanted to do a study. Um, I'm going to make a note of it because I keep talking about wanting to do this and then I don't.
Okay,
So,
yeah,
um, I want to say one of my colleagues I might have seen this somewhere actually.
yeah.
Someone might have done this. Um, which is I wanted to look at a class. If our model is right, say organic chemistry, um, you
Sorry about
might you might observe that uh, um, you have an 8 a.m. class and a noon class. And I wanted to see whether the performance of students was better in the noon class compared to the 8 a.m.
Okay.
class.
So funny enough, in WashU, so I was just laughing actually, but in WashU, Dr. Herzog brought up that he actually they have data. So there is a increase in class enrollment, not necessarily academic performance, but an increase in enrollment for his class time. I think he teaches a class on campus at WashU, and I think he saw around a 400% increase in enrollment. It's in my interview, so you can find the exact number, but they actually did not like an official study, right? But they found a huge increase in enrollment when they shifted from 8 a.m., I believe, to around 4 p.m. So that
Mhm.
kind of speaks to what you're talking about here. But this has been done before, is what I'm trying to say, and I think your instinct is definitely true. And speaking of baseball, I'm sure you know about like the sports chronobiologists, like for a lot of teams. And I'm just curious if you could like talk about maybe their role a little bit from what you know.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I have a little bit of experience. Well, so we published a paper about 7 years ago now, or 8 years ago, looking at the effect of jet lag in Major League
Okay.
Baseball.
Yeah.
We looked at 20 years of data, and the long story short is we saw that pitchers particularly gave up more home runs when they were jet lagged.
Okay.
Um, and so actually, I was contacted by the Cubs
Wow.
about this. I was at Northwestern at the time,
Okay. That's
and we had a little discussion about this, and they were interested in general. But they did point out to me that it's very hard to get professional athletes to change their routine.
that's yeah, that's
They're very successful.
right.
I think a lot of the teams do have sports chronobiology
Yeah.
consulting groups
Yeah.
help them. I will say this though. So there was a kind of a landmark paper from Bill Schwartz published in the early 90s looking at jet lag in baseball, just a couple of years. So we did a much more comprehensive and looked a little bit more deeply than what he did. So it became aware, there was an awareness of the effect of jet lag in baseball. And of course, I think
Yeah.
athletes always knew like being jet lagged was not good.
Yeah.
Um, so in our study of 20 years, our 20-year data, basically that paper was published at the beginning of the 20 years,
Oh,
right? So you might, and over that time, we knew that teams had been picking up these sports consultants,
right.
chronobiologist consultants.
Yeah.
And so we specifically wanted to know, we looked whether over the course of the 20 years we looked, did the jet lag effect go away?
Uh,
Did teams adjust and make adjustments when they were traveling such that now when you travel from Los Angeles to New York, you don't have the jet lag effect because they maybe sent their players early, maybe they, made some adjustment to deal with it because they're getting consulted. We did not see any change
wow.
the course of the course, so the effect of jet lag was the same. I think it was around 2010 that we was the last year we looked versus like in early 1990. So if there are these consultants, which I suspect are there,
Right. Right.
they did not have a measurable impact on this jet lag effect.
I'm not really sure. Like, maybe could you like explain like what's like even like one or two ways they could like really change like
Oh yeah.
or
So yeah,
impact?
in fact, one time I got a phone call from the Cubs and they said, "Oh, what should we do?" And I said and they were asking about a specific game.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
It's,
and so in this game, the Cubs were playing in Arizona, and the next game they were going to be playing in Chicago. So they asked how should they handle that game? And I said, well, you should, and teams do this already. I know that teams actually do this. So maybe I wasn't telling them something they didn't know.
okay.
But what you do is whenever you travel across time zones, and it's worse when you go east
Yeah.
compared to when
Yeah.
you go west. Because our clocks are naturally a little bit longer than 24. So it's easier to delay the clock than advance it.
Yeah.
Um, so we can advance maybe about 1 hour per day. So if you travel across 3 time zones, it'll take you 3 days to
Uh,
catch up, to get back in sync with the new time zone. So the way to handle not being jet lagged would be to send your player a few days early, and then they would adjust to the new time zone. Then they would be ready and not jet lag when the
Okay.
game comes.
Interesting.
And for Major League Baseball, starting pitchers pitch every fifth day. So many of them can be sent a few days in advance. They're not going to
Yeah.
play in the games
Right.
before that. So and of course, as we showed in our study, it's actually the pitchers who had the biggest impact of jet lag. So
Right.
it's both the biggest impact and the most fixable. So I explained this to them, and as it turned out, the pitcher who was pitching that day um, was noted to give up a lot of home runs.
Wow.
So he would have been like the perfect candidate to be have the jet lag effect because he gives up a lot of home runs. So jet lag pitchers give up a lot of home runs.
Yeah.
So so I watched this game very intently,
Yeah.
and thankfully the guy pitched great.
That's
Uh,
good.
and
Yeah.
so
You
I
had
don't
a
know
role
if
in
I can take
that.
credit. I don't know if I can take credit for that one, but
Yeah.
I'll take a little bit of credit for that.
That's a great
Free
story.
advice, I should say, free.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
So this is kind of more looking toward the future, but just looking ahead in general, what kind of unanswered questions about the circadian clock or what kind of research do you want to see going on in the next 5 to 10?
well, I think the link between circadian rhythms and health and disease is really front and center.
Yeah.
Uh, for example, I think how circadian rhythms are linked to cancer
Yeah.
and cancer chemotherapy, timing of cancer
Yeah.
chemotherapy, how it's linked to depression and but particularly bipolar depression,
Yeah.
how circadian clocks are linked to Alzheimer's disease and neurodegenerative disease,
Yeah.
to autism. So these are all,
Yeah.
to me, very exciting. We've moved beyond the basic science, and now we're trying to leverage that basic understanding of the clock and there's some great work that Eric Herzog
Yeah,
published.
so actually, in my lab, like when I first joined, I was working on a different project, but you were one of the PhD candidates that my desk was right next to. She was working on some really cool stuff with cancer and just timing of chemotherapy. And
Mhm.
back then, I knew very little about circadian science, so I was shocked by, oh, I never
Yeah.
really thought about like when you have chemotherapy could really make a difference. And I'm so glad I was exposed to that because now I'm working with a professor from Arizona where we're trying to study like the dysregulation of circadian rhythms in autism. And
Mm.
what he does is over the past few years, he prescribes melatonin to his patients to
Mhm.
because there's a huge link between autism and circadian rhythms. And
Yep.
chronomedicine in general is something that I'm really interested in. So I'm glad that you brought it up as something that you think you see is very important because I think that people are starting to realize how just timing of when you take things really plays a role in its impact.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So with that, thank you for taking the time to join me and speak with me. I think we had a great conversation, and it was very interesting to hear about your role with the Cubs. But
Yeah. So background story.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure you talk about that quite a bit.
Thank you for having me, and
Yeah.
it's great chatting.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And if you guys enjoyed this interview, be sure to like, leave a review, and share with someone else who needs better sleep.